Welcome everybody to another Tactics Tuesday. Today what we're going to be talking about is AI for Amazon and specifically talking about the hype versus reality. I think we bring some very unique perspectives to this, both from the brand perspective and then also from the agency perspective of, how much is AI really moving the needle on Amazon? What does that look like? And what things out there are still very much hype when it comes to AI for Amazon sellers? And so with that, I'll actually turn it over to you, Matt, because I know you spend quite a bit of time immersed in this world as far as connecting AI and Amazon. What do you see on the field right now?
In terms of AI for Amazon, I think we're talking about images specifically. So I've seen a lot of really now. ChatGPT just updated their image generation tool, which for me, in my opinion, like I didn't play around with Midjourney all that much, anywhere near as much as I know that Michael did. But for me, the ChatGPT image generation tool, when they upgraded it about a month ago, is night and day better than it was before. And I did a lot of extensive playing around with it. Now, for some reason, AI doesn't understand certain products like pool cleaning tools, for example. It just does not understand what a pool brush is used for or how it's used, no matter how many times you ask it to change. So, and that's still the case, even with the upgraded ChatGPT version of ChatGPT's image generation tool. However, there are other types of products. That a girl in my mastermind sells flower seeds, for example, and the images that she's been able to make with the ChatGPT image generation tool, but also Midjourney, are fantastic. I mean, better than what she was getting from her graphic designer before. So there's still a lot of really good use from these image generation tools for certain products, but none that we work with directly, unfortunately. It just doesn't understand what the products are being used for, what the use case is, and none of the products really fit well within just put this product in a different scenery, which is, I think the image generation tools are really good at that. But yeah, so for the products that I work with directly, it's not good enough yet to understand what the use case of the tools are. So I haven't been able to really use it in that regard, at least for the brands that I'm involved in.
Well, and to kind of summarize that, at least, from what I'm seeing, is first of all, the tools have gotten a lot better. So if you haven't used them in the last 6 to 12 months, they've gotten dramatically better when we talk about specifically AI generation. And what I would say out of that is that kind of like what you were talking about, Matt, which is, if you look at doing things like changing out backgrounds and kind of things in the backdrop, if you have, a photo of your product and you want to change out kind of that background, it does work well for that. However, with that said, if you're looking at people or you're looking at complicated products, those types of things, there's still some significant challenges there. That said, I do think that there's a great opportunity for, even if you already kind of have your set images, we were just working with a client the other day where we were looking at a Father's Day promotion. And so, that's a perfect example where I think, there's an opportunity for ChatGPT where the main photos, and we've got some resources already built there that then we can use something, ChatGPT or another AI image generator, in order to create those kind of promo specific images that can make a lot of sense. But I do think that we're still too early for the days of, I know I've already gotten this question from a few clients of like, hey, do I need a photo shoot anymore? Can't I just, whip it up in AI? And it's like, well, we're not quite there for most products yet. You're going to have to do some sort of, photo or video shoot. Now, the nice thing is I think that you can extend those resources once you have them from a decent photo shoot to do a lot more with it than what you could do in the past. So think about it more from a, getting a lot more bang for your buck as opposed to completely replacing any sort of photo or video shoot. So that's what I'm seeing from it, especially on the image side. Mike, I'd love to hear, what you're seeing from the brand owner perspective.
Yeah, I think a few things. One thing that I would say is I do think that we are moving into a space, like you just said, you're not going to be able to skip the photo shoot or the video shoot, right? I think that for some products that might not be true. I think there are products that you probably could skip the photo shoot. You might not be able to as easily skip the video shoot, but by the same token, you could use UGC for that. You could use influencers for video stuff, potentially, as opposed to necessarily a video shoot. Now, depends on what kind of marketing you're trying to do, depends on where the videos are going. Maybe you still need the video shoot. But when I say that you might be able to skip the photo shoot, I think that we've gotten some really good renders done of our products. Now, again, as Matt said, our products are not really AI friendly. I can't just give it a pool net and say, this is our pool net, put it into this, it doesn't do that. It doesn't know what to do with it. But that being said, there are a lot of products that AI can do that with, can really take, especially, like supplements, take like a supplement container or a drink container or a, kitchen gadgets or things like that, where it kind of understands the scene, it kind of understands how people use it, it can place it in the kitchen with the mom and the kid. It's getting really good at that kind of thing. And I think especially for lifestyle images that are more about creating an emotion than they are about showing a specific feature of a product or something like that, I think you definitely can do a lot of that with AI right now for some products. And if you do some renderings, which are way faster and way cheaper than a photo shoot, a lot of those renderings can then be turned into AI imagery. So I think you might be able to skip the photo shoot for some things. We definitely can't. But as you said, what AI is doing for us is it's providing a much easier way for us to repurpose the digital content that we already have. So if you're a brand that already has some relatively decent imagery, but you're looking to update it, I don't think you necessarily need a new photo or video shoot. You may be able to use AI to revamp those images, to give them better lighting, to make them look, change the positioning or something, to change out the person. Like Gemini, actually, their newest version for image generation and editing is actually quite good. You can feed Gemini an image. Now, I think you might have to be on a specific paid plan to utilize this feature. I'm not positive. I'm on it, so it works for me, but for some people it might not. But you can feed it an image and change out a very specific component of that image. And it doesn't change anything else. It just changes that. And it actually does quite a good job at that. So, and it's not just background replacement, although you can do that. It's also, I've taken images and put them in there of a particular person using our product. And I basically said, hey, make them older, or make it a woman, or make whatever. It actually does quite a good job at that. I think for some products, you might even be able to change the positioning or how they're holding the item or how they're using the item, change the background and the person. So I do think we are moving into a space right now where even today, you can definitely use AI to repurpose a lot of imagery that you already have and make some of those edits without having to be a Photoshop expert, to be able to do that and make it look right. Because one of the nice things about AI, this is the thing that I think this is probably the biggest thing that makes AI useful for image editing, is because a lot of times if you try to change out a person or change the positioning or add an item to an image or something, the biggest thing that's difficult if you're not an expert in Photoshop is getting the lighting and the shadowing right. It's really difficult getting the perspective right on that object and having it be able to fit into the image properly so that the eye doesn't catch it and be like, that something's not right there. AI has actually become really good at doing that, where it can insert something into an image and give it the proper lighting, shadowing, and perspective so that you can't really tell it's been inserted. It looks like it was there all the time. And so that, I think, is really useful. The other thing that I want to add is just a practical component, and that is if you look at Amazon, there are a lot of products that are selling massive volume, have really good reviews, and are doing exceptionally well on the platform. And if you look at their images, it is obvious that they are renders or AI generated, like you can tell. But people are still buying those products and still giving them good reviews, and they're still getting good sales volumes. So don't get super wrapped up in making sure that your image is perfect. I do think, it'd be nice, like if you can create an image where somebody can't tell, I think that's better. I don't, however, think that it's absolutely necessary, especially in certain product categories. If most of your competitors are using images that it's obvious it's AI, if you could just do a better version that maybe it's still somewhat, noticeable, but it's not as obvious, that might be enough in your category.
Yeah, well, and I think, if we set aside the words AI, we could have said the same before AI came along. You could say the same thing about, I think we've all seen them over the years of products that do really well, even though their images are ugly, or
Yeah.
what we would consider ugly. And I mean, we've had that happen too, where, we've had tested, what is a prettier image versus an uglier one. And sometimes, the not so perfect image wins when we start looking at clicks and conversion rates and really driving sales and the things that matter. So, I think that's such a great point, Mike. The other thing that I would add, to what you said that I think is really important is, how you can adjust those images. Because what I feel like maybe doesn't get enough attention in this conversation is, we talk about going from, hey, do I need a photo shoot? Do I not need a photo shoot? Those types of things. I think the big win really in the next year is going to come from being able to rapidly A/B test, main images, secondary image stacks, video, all these different things to really, dial in the click-through rate and conversion rate on your listings with a heck of a lot less resources than you needed before. Because if you, like you said, if you can change out that image to where you're like, hey, I have the same image and I'm able to make this person look older, or, make it a woman instead of a man, all those kinds of changes, now you can, really A/B test things a lot faster and with a lot less resource, because you don't have to do a whole new photo shoot or have a graphic designer spend a couple of hours, in Photoshop cutting out that person and adding another person in and all those types of things. You can put it into, Gemini or ChatGPT or something like that and have something back in, 30 seconds and then be able to go test it. So I think there's a lot of value that comes from that testing aspect as well.
Yeah, my Photoshop skills are miserable. My stick figures are unrecognizable. But what the new version of ChatGPT's image generation tool has allowed me to do is iterate, like you said, a whole lot faster. Like, John, for example, we have a client that sells hangers, and there's different types of hangers. One of them has a bar with clips on the bottom of it. I needed another image, a duplicate image of the hanger that didn't have those clips. So instead of going back and forth with my graphic designer and waiting a couple of hours for the revision, I just uploaded the picture inside of ChatGPT. I asked it, no, this was just a test. I didn't know if this was going to work. As a matter of fact, I didn't think it was going to work. I just asked it to remove the roll bar with the clips, and it did a 90%. It did a way better job than I would have been able to do. It cut out the corners of it, and I think that was just something that if I was better at prompting for images, I think I could have resolved that. But 10 seconds later, I had an image that was good enough for me to at least split test where I was using it for. So that's probably saved me not 4 hours of work, but 4 hours of communication back and forth with the graphic designer. And I was able to get something good enough for testing in a span of about 15 or 20 seconds. And this is coming from someone who doesn't know the first thing about Photoshop and actually gets very frustrated because I can't get things to look how I want it to. So for me, it's made me 1,000 times faster in just iterating and getting something that I can split test to see if it converts better than what we currently have. So way, way faster than how I used to do it.
Well, it's also important, I think, to recognize that because of that, if you have anybody on your team who is even marginally good with Canva or GIMP or Photoshop or something like that, like just basic skill, then that person becomes an individual who can do a lot more for you in that space now that they have AI, to do most of the heavy lifting, and they can just do a little bit of editing, after the fact to repair, whatever little artifacts there might be or something. That's way easier than them having to do all the work themselves. And so, again, like you said, you don't need that super high priced editor. You just need somebody who needs some basic skills. Either you learn some of those basic skills. If you're a one-person operation, take a few days to learn how to use Canva well. Canva's pretty powerful. It's not Adobe Photoshop, but it's pretty powerful. And it's got some really sweet tools in there that I'm not even sure that Adobe has. And so if you just took a few days and got to know how to use Canva, that combined with some of the other AI tools out there make you a super ninja, in terms of being able to create, graphic content and make adjustments, here and there.
Yeah. And I think, just to kind of wrap up the AI image conversation, because I think this brought something to my mind based on what you were talking about, Matt, which was, we had a client that accidentally, for one of their family of products, accidentally deleted the listing. And then they also deleted kind of the backup files that they had for those images. And so we basically had to recreate those images by looking at one of their other product families that was similar. And I mean, the only reason we were really able to do that was because of AI. And so, from that use case, I think there's also an opportunity to look at your competitors and, probably, I think, circling back to what you said, Mike, that I just want to double click on, which is look at what your competitors are doing. And if there's something that you're like, wow, I wish, we had an image like that, or we could do something like that. And then one step better, like you can do that so quickly with AI to take that image and say, okay, now add our product into it, add this one additional feature or benefit to it. And now you have, an image that's even better than what your competitors have with, less than 2 minutes worth of work. So I think there's a huge opportunity there for, kind of adjusting images using a lot of the AI tools that are available now.
One of the things, well, go ahead, Matt. Looked like you were going to say something.
I was just going to say, yeah. So, I mean, for me, like we do still have a graphic designer. There are still things that we use that graphic designer for. And John, you mentioned the Father's Day image. As a matter of fact, for that client today, I knew what I wanted in my mind's eye, the badge to look like on the packaging. And so I just went into ChatGPT knowing that it wasn't going to be the final product, just that I was going to give something to kind of spark the imagination of our graphic designer. It took me 3 seconds. Now it changed up a lot of the elements on the box to make it wasn't usable, but it allowed me to give, instead of having to type out on a Slack message what I wanted to see, it allowed me to really, really quickly use ChatGPT to give him an idea of what it was that I was looking for. So again, even though I was using the graphic designer to give me the finished product, it allowed me to show him what it was I was seeing in my mind's eye a whole lot faster than me explaining it to him.
So the other thing that I wanted to say is we're talking a lot about using AI with Amazon Images, but we're talking a lot about generation of images and editing of images, which is important. I mean, like there's a lot of that goes on, and I think it's valuable. And just real briefly, before I move on to what I actually want to say, I do want to, just double click on that idea, John, that you were talking about in terms of iterations and testing of images. I don't think that a lot of sellers, and it might not be so much because they don't know, it might just be because in the past it's been so difficult to do and so expensive to do because you'd have to pay a graphic designer and go through all this hassle, that it just hasn't happened. And that is the difference in click-through on an image that has a guy versus a lady, or a younger guy versus an older guy, or an image that has a dog in it versus an image that doesn't have a dog in it. Like, there are so many different small changes that you could make to an image that for the avatar that you're after could instantly improve your click-through rate by 50% or double it, that are very simple changes that could be made with AI in a couple of minutes. That's the sort of area where I think there's a lot of power in this, in terms of those iterations, is thinking about, and this ties into the next thing that I want to say, which is the other value piece with AI at this point is it now can understand images. And so if you give it an image and you tell the AI what the purpose of the image is and a little bit of background on who your customer avatar is, it can analyze that image and give you some ideas about how you might improve on it. And then you can take those ideas, figure out which of those are the easiest ones to implement with AI, make those changes, and then do the split tests based on that information that AI is giving you. We're also moving into a space where if you know what you're doing and you can create a custom GPT or maybe some sort of an N8N workflow that does this, where we've got tools like PickFu and IntelliV and things like that out there where you split test images beforehand, you can now start the process. There are ways to do this where you can split test 2 images with AI and basically tell it who's the avatar that you're aiming at, and what are you trying to accomplish with the image, what's the benefit that you're trying to solidify, what's the emotion you're trying to generate, whatever. Give it the 2 images and have it do its own poll. And you would be amazed, I think people listening would be amazed at, there are some models out there, people are generating these models that almost all the time the AI is picking the true winner. Like if you run the split test on Amazon, the results from that split test match what the AI is telling you is the better image.
Yeah, I think we're just kind of touching the surface on that. We've talked a lot about image generation, which I think is great because I think that's where we've seen well, one, I think there's a lot of value in it for brands that are looking at increasing clicks and conversions and ultimately sales. I think the other thing I want to, kind of touch on as well, especially Mike, as you brought up, some of the custom GPTs and that type of thing that people have put out there. Again, I say this with a word of caution, which is those GPTs are only as good as the people that have built them, and they are, static, meaning they're only as good as the time that they were built. If we're talking about custom GPTs, I know Mike, you're working on, say the name of it again.
N8N. So Nancy, the number 8, Nancy, N8N.
Yeah, N8N, which is much more closer to, generative AI, where it learns as you go, and having, access to what are essentially AI agents, I think is kind of the terminology that's being used for those right now. But even with, take a custom GPT, I think something that we have found really helpful, and looking at, even ads and, strategies of like, hey, we're looking at how do we boost sales for this brand, and asking the AI a bunch of questions. And frankly, for someone that has been doing this for 5 years, probably 80% of that, the ideas that it gives you, you're either like, oh, we're already doing that, or that's not a good idea for this brand because of X. That said, there's another 10 to 20% that, like, just jog something in your memory. You're like, oh yeah, we can run that type of campaign, or this type of coupon, or whatever it happens to be, that tool in the toolbox that helps just kind of prime the pump and help you, think through ideas on how to boost sales, how to increase conversions, different, ad types if you're running your own PPC. But I think that's another area where there's a lot of value in having those conversations with, ChatGPT or some of these custom GPTs to help brand owners get some ideas and answers pretty quickly on the problems that they're facing, with some good answers.
Don't even get me started with custom GPTs. I have become addicted to building them now. And actually, I've probably built 24 of them in the past week and a half, 2 weeks. And one of them, actually talking about Amazon and optimization, I built one that first of all, I learned how to optimize a listing for Rufus. I went through a couple of deep research prompts and learned that, but then also used that deep research to create a custom GPT to help me rewrite listing copy for Rufus. It probably took me about an hour or so to learn what I wanted to learn and use that learning to create the custom GPT. But now I've already done it for, 3 or 4 client listings, just inputted the existing title, gave it a little bit of information about the product and the avatar, and it rewrites titles for me. So, custom GPTs, I have been using them for about 6 to 8 months to make my life a lot easier, but they're so easy to create that, like I said, every day I think of another use case for another custom GPT, and to be honest, most of them are all involved around optimization on Amazon. It's made my workflow so much easier using these chat GPTs. And now, after a couple of conversations with Michael, we're going to turn some of those custom GPTs into add some automation to it using N8. They're going to be on steroids here very, very soon. So there's so many custom GPTs already out there, but also they're not that hard to create. If you have an idea for one, or have a use case for one, learning how to create them are super easy, and they're so useful.
The other thing that I think is important on the AI front, and with regards to custom GPTs and a number of other aspects, is that AI, I feel like one of the things that people tend not to recognize as a value component, let's say, is using AI to tell you what you don't know and what you need to know to move forward with something. So, in other words, reverse engineering a problem, let's say. So, let's take the situation that Matt's talking about. Let's say you're an individual who, number one, doesn't know a whole lot about how to optimize an Amazon listing. Number two, also doesn't know a whole lot about how to build a custom GPT. You could step into ChatGPT and say, I'm an Amazon seller and I want to update my listing and improve the click-through and conversion rates on my listing. How do I do it? What are the things I need to know that I don't know? Let the AI train you on what needs to happen in order for me to be able to fix that. What are the things I need to know? What are the things I would need to change? It will tell you those things. And then you can back up again and say, okay, how do I learn that? Or how do I do that? Or how do I whatever? So you just keep stepping back as far as you need to step until you reach the point where you're at the place where your knowledge foundation is enough to move forward from there. You just keep backing up until it reaches the point where you have the knowledge base you need. So, again, same thing with the custom GPT. Let's say okay, the AI has told you these are the things that generally you'd want to pay attention to in order to update a listing. For your customer avatar and your product category, these are the things that you would want to do. Okay, how do I do that? All right, this is how I do that. Then, all right, now I want to build. Now you tell ChatGPT, all right, I want to build a custom GPT that will help me do that. What would be the prompt? What are the instructions that I should put into that custom GPT so that it will do what you just told me are the right things to do in order to update a listing? It'll write a prompt for you. Then you can ask it, how would we improve on that prompt? And it'll write a new prompt. It'll improve on itself. What sort of documents should I upload for the knowledge base for this custom GPT? Where would I find that information? How would I put the documents together? AI will walk you through the entire process of building that custom GPT if you don't know how to do it. So don't get intimidated by the process. You will learn a lot just by asking AI, how do I do this? What do I need to know in order to do this? And just let it walk you back until you reach the point where you're like, okay, I know enough to move forward from here, and then just do it.
So I think we spent quite a bit of time talking about, and I feel like all three of us feel like that, AI is definitely a big value add for brand owners that are building on Amazon and beyond. I do want to touch a little bit on, what we feel like is the hype out there where AI gets overhyped. And I'll start with the first area that I feel like AI gets most overhyped is probably in the PPC or the ads realm. I still feel like there's this pipe dream out there where people are like, well, I'm just going to put in my brand and my product and AI is going to magically do all the work and adjust all the bids and that type of stuff. Now, there's a lot of good machine learning and there's a lot of things that AI can do around, analyzing data and doing a lot of that work for you. But when I think it comes down to actually, steering campaigns and that type of stuff, I've still feel like there's a lot of value of having the human in the loop rather than just kind of handing it off to AI when it comes to Amazon ads, at least as of right now.
Yeah, I think AI can do bid optimization. Essentially, bid optimization is a math equation that computers are good at. But where I think I've used a couple of tools for Amazon PPC management, and I think for me, where I would second guess using AI is to like keyword harvesting, for example. It does keyword harvesting just based on rules. And if a keyword converted in a research campaign, it'll automatically create a manual campaign for that. And when I did that, it just went nuts. It went absolutely nuts and added a whole bunch of irrelevant keywords. So I think having a human in the loop in terms of advertising is super important. I don't know if that's going to go away anytime soon, but bid optimization, I think bid optimization is something that you can use some sort of a tool for and be pretty confident. But yeah, human in the loop when it comes to advertising for sure, at least in the short term.
I think the other one is, well, in a general sense, I would say anytime you see, a new hype video come out or things like that, you're seeing best case scenario of what that AI can do. And I can tell you from experience, virtually every single video that I've seen where somebody was like, look at this really cool thing, whatever. I tested it. And if I was to pull back on the expectation by about 75, like maybe 70% of what they said was real, then yeah, no, it can do that. And if 70% of that is useful to you, then great. Like that's perfect. But recognize that in almost every case, the things that you're seeing people doing with AI, it's a very specific use case. It is not generalized well to other use cases, other products, other, like it's this thing. It was able to do that really, really well. Now, in 3 to 6 months, it's highly likely that whatever it was able to do in that very specific instance, it will be able to generalize and do better in a whole bunch of other instances. So I don't think it's, I guess the one caution I would issue is don't ignore the hype. Just recognize that whatever the hype is today is probably reality in 6 months. So be ready for it. make sure you understand what that was able to do that. If you're looking at that thing and you say, that's something that would really be valuable in our business, and take a step back and make sure that's true, that it's not just shiny object like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Just because it's cool doesn't mean it will be valuable in your business. So make that evaluation first. But if you believe it would be, if you think that it would pull some lever in your business that right now you're not able to effectively pull, then keep that in the back of your mind, write it on a notepad, put it in Asana to come back and check it, in 3 months or something, because there's a good chance in 3 to 6 months you will be able to apply that to whatever it is that you want to. Things are moving that fast. But today, it's probably not going to generalize to what you want. So that's one of the things. And I think video is one of those, right? Like, you can create some pretty impressive 8-second videos. Very few of us is an 8-second video going to be very useful to us. Now, we might be able to piece together, 3 or 4 or 5 8-second clips with a couple of little clips that we already have of our own video and create a longer, video that maybe we could do something with. But also, again, if you want the right person, or if you want your product in it, or, things of that nature, video's not there, and it won't be for a little while. So there are definitely some areas where the hype is, unjustified in the moment, but you should be paying attention to it. And one of the things I would actually caution and suggest that people do is you need to create some sort of AI workflow, agent, custom GPT, task, whatever. There's bazillion tools out there to do something like this that is keeping tabs on what is happening in AI out there that you might not know about because you don't have the time to be researching it 24/7. What are the new things that are happening that apply to you, and making sure that you're getting a digest of those things and maybe a summarization of what it is and a link back to the reference, so that you have opportunity to keep up on that thing, whatever those things are, so you're ready for them when they really are prime time.
John, before you wrap up, I want to just real quick, Arif has been commenting, and he had a question that Michael posed about split testing using AI. So I just want Arif to know, I'll have Michael go in and answer your question in the comments of this. So just want to make sure that we get that covered, because he's been asking a couple of questions in the chat.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
And that's the advantage. So for anybody most people listen to this kind of after the fact, that's the benefit of what we've started to do is at 12:15 Central Time, or around that time, post live on LinkedIn. So this is a good example of why to show up live and listen live on LinkedIn, because we will answer your questions live as a part of the podcast. So that's awesome. Thanks for bringing that in, Matt. And I do think that this is a great place to kind of wrap for this episode. I think we've covered quite a bit of things that, again, I think are really helpful for brand owners. And Mike, I think you hit the nail on the head as far as, yes, a lot of things you're going to see out there, are best case scenario of how these AI tools are being used, but really they're a good indication of probably where things are going to be in 6 to 12 months. And if you can get at least 70% of that value out of it today, it's probably worth spending some time on. And then what I would wrap up with for my pieces is that the one piece of advice that I have for listeners, and brand owners are like, hey, how do I get more involved in this AI and that type of stuff? Whatever problem you're facing in your business, take a little bit of time to look on YouTube. Somebody's probably built an AI solution, or a custom GPT or something like that for it. And use an AI tool in order to solve that problem. And you'll probably find a good portion of the time that you can find a solution, or at least, be pretty far down the path on a solution from AI tools, or even a custom GPT that's completely free, that's already exists out there. So I would just really encourage brand owners to do a little bit of that research into how can I leverage an AI tool in order to solve whatever the problem is that you're facing in your brand right now. Any other last pieces of advice from you, Matt or Mike?
I'll just reiterate custom GPTs. If you're not familiar with them, if you haven't used them at all, go inside of your ChatGPT right now and click on the little Explore GPTs button, because there are literally thousands and thousands of them that exist for any question, any specialty that you're looking for. There's already a custom GPT out there that exists. So if you haven't played around with them yet, definitely do that when you hear this.
Yeah. And I would say, as you test it, if you don't like it, test a different one. Oftentimes there's 5 or 10 different custom GPTs for what it is that you're trying to do. And if none of them are right, build your own. I mean, as Matt said, they're not as hard as you think, especially if you allow AI to help you reverse engineer the process. And then I would also just come back to, make sure if you're not using AI for anything else, use it for deep research. It's really useful for that. And use it at this point for image iteration and split testing. Because honestly, if you can take an image and in 30 seconds or a minute, create a new image that just changes out the person or the color of their shirt or put a dog in the image or whatever, and you can test that, I guarantee you're going to find small incremental improvements in your CTR and CVR. And if you just keep doing that, that alone, if you did nothing else in your business, is going to improve your sales.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap for today's episode. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday on another Tactics Tuesday.